Hello, my name is Rebecca, and I'm about to tell you a story that completely changed my family dynamics forever. Picture this. You've saved every penny for 6 years, finally bought your dream property, and then overhear your own parents planning to give it away to your brother's family without even asking you. That's exactly what happened to me, and what I did next left everyone speechless. At 34, I'm a certified financial planner working in downtown Seattle. While my colleagues were out enjoying happy hours and weekend getaways, I was packing lunches and living in a cramped studio apartment, all for one goal: owning investment property. My older brother Marcus, 37, charming and charismatic, had always been the family favorite. He was also spectacularly irresponsible with money. Credit card debt, failed business ventures, borrowing from our parents repeatedly. The pattern was as predictable as Seattle rain. But this story isn't just about money or property. It's about the moment I realized that being the reliable daughter had turned me into the family doormat. It's about discovering that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no, even when it breaks your heart. Before we embark on this incredible journey together, I have a small heartfelt favor to ask. Please subscribe to my channel. Give this video a thumbs up. It costs you nothing, but means the world to me. And let me know in the comments which beautiful corner of the world you're watching from. Your support truly makes all the difference. Growing up in our Bellevue home, there was always an unspoken hierarchy. Marcus was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the responsible one expected to clean up messes. Our parents, Patricia and Robert, ran a small accounting firm together, which made Marcus's financial disasters even more embarrassing for them. Yet somehow, I was always the one expected to contribute to his bailouts. The pattern started early. When Marcus was 25, he bought an expensive motorcycle on credit, then couldn't make payments. Who co-signed the refinancing loan? Me. When he started a food truck business that failed within 8 months, who helped cover the remaining equipment payments? Me again. When his wife Amanda, a part-time yoga instructor, had their twin boys Camden and Tyler, who provided free childcare every weekend so they could have couple time? You guessed it. Meanwhile, I lived like a monk. My studio apartment in Capitol Hill was tiny but affordable. I meal prepped every Sunday, bought clothes from thrift stores, and drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic that refused to die. Every month, I transferred 40% of my income into my property investment fund. My coworkers thought I was crazy, living so frugally while helping others manage their wealth. The duplex hunt consumed my evenings for months. I researched neighborhoods, studied market trends, and attended open houses religiously. When I found the perfect property in the Greenwood neighborhood, a charming 1920s duplex with original hardwood floors and separate entrances for each unit, I knew it was the one. The seller was motivated, the price was fair, and the rental potential was excellent. The closing process was nerve-wracking. As a single woman buying her first investment property, I felt every bit of scrutiny from the lenders. But my credit score was pristine, my down payment substantial, and my income steady. The day I received those keys, standing alone in the empty duplex, I felt a pride unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I decided to keep the purchase secret until everything was finalized. Partly because I wanted to surprise my family, but mostly because I feared they'd immediately start scheming about how Marcus could benefit from my success. My plan was simple but brilliant. I'd live in the larger unit while renting out the smaller one. The rental income would cover 60% of my mortgage, building equity while keeping my housing costs low. I spent weekends painting walls in soft, neutral tones and researching tenant screening processes. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Marcus and Amanda's situation had deteriorated recently. He'd lost his sales job at a tech startup when the company downsized, and Amanda's yoga classes weren't generating enough income. With 6-year-old twins, their expenses were mounting while their income shrank. They were facing a rental increase that would strain their budget beyond breaking point. I felt genuine sympathy for their plight, but I also recognized the familiar pattern. Marcus had never built an emergency fund, never developed backup plans, never considered the possibility that his employment might be unstable. He lived paycheck to paycheck, spending money on craft beer, expensive coffee, and the latest gadgets while ignoring basic financial planning. As I arranged for utilities and scheduled professional cleaning for both duplex units, I felt a growing sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just a property purchase. It was proof that careful planning and delayed gratification could achieve dreams. I'd created a path toward financial independence without anyone's help. The weekend before I planned to announce my purchase, I invited my college roommate Jessica over to see the property. As we walked through the empty rooms, she marveled at the original crown molding and the way afternoon light streamed through the large windows. "Rebecca, this is incredible," she said. "You should be so proud of what you've accomplished." Her validation meant everything. For years, I'd felt like the boring one in my family, the one who chose spreadsheets over spontaneity. But standing in my own property, I realized that discipline and planning had their own rewards. I scheduled tenant interviews for the following week and began drafting lease agreements. The market research suggested I could charge $1,500 monthly for the smaller unit, which would make my investment even more profitable than initially calculated. Sunday dinner at my parents' house was a weekly tradition I rarely missed. I drove there that weekend with champagne in my car and excitement in my heart, ready to share my news and celebrate this milestone with my family. I arrived early at my parents' house that Sunday, as was customary, to help my mother with dinner preparation. The familiar sounds and smells of home, classical music playing softly, the aroma of pot roast, my father's sports commentary drifting from the living room, usually brought me comfort. Today, they provided the perfect cover for the conversation that would change everything. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for the salad, when I heard the front door open. Marcus's voice boomed through the hallway as he greeted our parents, followed by Amanda's softer tones and the boys' excited chatter about their soccer game. My mother wiped her hands on her apron and went to welcome them, leaving me alone with the cutting board. After the initial greetings, the adult voices moved toward my father's study, just adjacent to the kitchen. The old house had thin walls, and their hushed tones carried clearly to where I stood. At first, I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping. I was focused on preparing dinner. But then I heard my father say something that made my hands freeze mid-chop. "It's the perfect solution. Rebecca has all this extra space now, and Marcus needs a stable place for the boys." My heart began racing. Extra space? How could they possibly know about the duplex? I hadn't told anyone in my family yet. I set down the knife and strained to hear more. My mother's voice joined in. "She's always been so generous with family. That's how we raised her. And those boys need stability after all the upheaval with Marcus losing his job." Amanda spoke next. "The timing couldn't be better. Rebecca's place is in the same school district, so Camden and Tyler wouldn't have to switch schools. And with the separate entrance, we'd have complete privacy." Then Marcus, "I feel bad about asking, but rent-free would really help us get back on our feet. Once I find something permanent, we could start contributing something." The blood drained from my face. They weren't just discussing my property. They'd already decided that Marcus and his family would be moving in, without rent, without even consulting me. My father continued, "Rebecca won't mind. She understands family obligations. And frankly, she could use some liveliness in her life instead of always working and saving money." Their casual dismissal of my autonomy was staggering. 6 years of sacrifice, months of property hunting, weeks of paperwork and inspections, all reduced to extra space that they could allocate according to their preferences. When we finally gathered around the dining table, I felt like an actor in a play where everyone else had memorized the script except me. The pot roast that usually made my mouth water tasted like cardboard as I waited for someone to bring up my property. The tension in my chest made it difficult to engage in small talk about the boys' soccer season and Amanda's new yoga certification. Halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat in that way that signaled an important family discussion was about to begin. My mother smiled broadly, practically vibrating with excitement about their wonderful solution to Marcus's housing crisis. "Rebecca," my father began, setting down his fork, "we need to discuss some family business. We've learned about your duplex purchase. Mrs. Chen from the real estate office mentioned seeing you there, and we're very proud of your investment." Before I could respond, Marcus jumped in with his trademark grin. "And the timing is absolutely perfect, sis. With our rent situation and the boys' school district, it makes total sense for us to take the other unit. Amanda and I have been so stressed about finding something affordable, and then Mom mentioned your place." Amanda nodded enthusiastically. "We promise to be perfect tenants. The boys are so excited about living near Aunt Rebecca. Camden's already asking if you can help him with his math homework every day." I looked around the table at their expectant faces. Even the twins were watching me with hopeful expressions, clearly having been told that Aunt Rebecca was going to solve their housing problems. The weight of their expectations felt crushing. "The best part," my mother added, "is that you won't have to deal with stranger tenants. Family is so much more reliable, and you know Marcus and Amanda will take good care of the property." My father nodded sagely. "It's a win-win situation. Marcus gets affordable housing, you get responsible tenants, and the boys stay in their school district. Family helping family, that's what matters most." The assumption that I would provide housing rent-free hadn't even been stated as a question. It was presented as a foregone conclusion, a natural extension of my role as the family safety net. Not once had anyone asked about my own plans for the property, my financial goals, or whether this arrangement would work for me. I managed to nod and smile weakly, overwhelmed by the coordinated presentation they'd clearly rehearsed. The conversation quickly moved to logistics. When they could start moving in, how to arrange utilities, whether I needed help relocating my belongings to make room. That night, I sat in my studio apartment with a cup of tea, staring out at the Seattle skyline and processing what had just happened. The city lights blurred as tears of frustration welled in my eyes. For 34 years, I'd been the accommodating daughter, the reliable sister, the family member who could always be counted on to sacrifice her own needs for others. I pulled out a legal pad and began listing every instance I could remember of being expected to put my family's needs before my own. The summer vacation to Hawaii, I'd canceled to loan Marcus money for car repairs. The countless weekends babysitting so he and Amanda could have date nights. The Christmas when my parents suggested I buy expensive gifts for all the kids since I didn't have my own family to spend money on. The list grew longer than I expected, filling 3 pages with incidents dating back to my college years. There was the time my parents paid Marcus's full tuition while I worked 2 jobs to fund my own education, justified because he was struggling more academically. The 3 separate loans I'd made to Marcus, each time accepting vague promises about repayment when things improved. But what struck me most was the complete absence of reciprocity. When had Marcus ever made a sacrifice for me? When had my parents considered my needs before making family decisions? The answer was painfully clear: never. The next morning I called in sick to work and drove to the duplex. Standing in the empty rooms I'd worked so hard to purchase, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. I would not be manipulated into giving up my investment. I would not continue enabling Marcus's financial irresponsibility, and I would not sacrifice my future for a family that took my generosity for granted. I called Jessica, who listened to my entire story without interruption. When I finished, her response was immediate and fierce. "Rebecca, you cannot let them do this to you. You've worked too hard and sacrificed too much to hand over your investment to Marcus rent-free. This is your chance to break the cycle." "But they'll be devastated," I said weakly, the lifetime conditioning of people-pleasing hard to overcome. "Good," Jessica replied bluntly. "Maybe devastation will motivate Marcus to take responsibility for once. You're not helping him by enabling his poor decisions. You're making it worse." Her words hit like a revelation. By always rescuing Marcus, I'd prevented him from learning essential life skills. My help had become a crutch that kept him dependent and irresponsible. Instead of confronting my family immediately, I chose a different strategy. I would accelerate my original plan and present them with a fait accompli. By Tuesday morning, I'd contacted 3 property management companies and scheduled consultations for that week. Evergreen Property Management impressed me most. Their representative, David Kim, met me at the Duplex and walked through both units with professional expertise. He suggested minor improvements that would increase rental value and assured me he could find qualified tenants quickly, given the desirable location and condition of the property. Based on current market rates and the quality of your property, David explained, I'd recommend $1,500 for the smaller unit and $1,700 for the larger one. Both are competitive prices that should attract stable, long-term tenants. The numbers were even better than I'd projected. Instead of living in one unit, I decided to rent both and find a small apartment closer to my office. This would maximize my rental income while creating emotional distance from the family drama I knew was coming. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I dodged increasingly frequent calls and texts from my family about moving logistics while secretly meeting potential tenants, reviewing applications, and preparing lease agreements. My parents left voicemails about organizing a duplex warming party for the whole family. Marcus texted daily, asking when he could start bringing boxes over. Each message strengthened my resolve. The casual assumption that they could plan my life without consulting me was breathtaking in its entitlement. They weren't just expecting free housing. They were expecting me to accommodate their timeline and preferences, as if the property belonged to them. By Thursday, I'd signed lease agreements with 2 excellent tenants. The smaller unit would be occupied by Dr. Jennifer Park, a resident at Seattle Children's Hospital who needed quiet space for studying. The larger unit went to the Morrison family, 2 teachers with an 8-year-old daughter who appreciated the family-friendly neighborhood. Both leases would begin the first of the following month, just 10 days away. I also secured a modern 1-bedroom apartment in Belltown, walking distance from my office. The timing was tight, but manageable. I told only Jessica about my new address, swearing her to secrecy. When Marcus called asking if I needed help packing, I gave vague responses about still organizing things. When my mother texted about measuring windows for curtains, I replied that I was handling final paperwork. The guilt was considerable, especially when Amanda sent me Pinterest boards of decorating ideas for their rooms, but each presumptuous message reinforced that I was making the right choice. The Saturday morning my tenants were scheduled to move in, I woke with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I'd successfully relocated to my Belltown apartment the weekend before, but my family still expected Marcus to be moving into the duplex that day. The collision course I'd set in motion was about to reach its inevitable conclusion. I arrived at the duplex at 9 a.m. to meet David and oversee the move-in process. Dr. Park was scheduled for 9:30 and the Morrisons for 11. Everything was proceeding according to plan until my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen, and my heart began racing. "Rebecca," he said cheerfully, "your mother and I are heading over to the duplex with coffee and pastries. Marcus and Amanda are meeting us there with their first load of boxes. We thought we'd make a celebration of it." The moment of truth had arrived earlier than expected. "Actually, Dad," I managed to say, "I'm already here meeting with someone. There's been a change in plans." "What kind of change?" His tone shifted from cheerful to concerned. "Marcus gave his landlord notice. They have to be out by tonight." Before I could respond, I saw my parents' silver Lexus turning onto the street, followed by Marcus's blue minivan packed with boxes and the boys' bicycles strapped to the roof. Behind them came a moving truck with Dr. Jennifer Park written on a magnetic sign. David, dressed in his professional Evergreen Property Management polo, approached me. "Mrs. Thompson, your family is here, and Dr. Park has arrived as well. How would you like to handle this?" I took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders. "Let's get this over with." My parents climbed out of their car looking confused as they noticed David and the moving truck. Marcus and Amanda emerged from their minivan with Camden and Tyler bouncing excitedly behind them. Dr. Park, a petite woman in scrubs carrying a coffee cup, stood by her car looking understandably puzzled by the crowd. "Rebecca," my mother called out, holding a bag of pastries. "What's happening? Who are all these people?" I walked toward my family, my heart hammering, but my resolve firm. "Mom, Dad, Marcus, Amanda," I began. "I need to explain something. I've rented both units of the duplex to qualified tenants. Dr. Park here is moving into the smaller unit today, and the Morrison family is moving into the larger unit this afternoon." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face went from confusion to disbelief to anger in rapid succession. Amanda gasped audibly. My parents looked at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "You did what?" Marcus finally exploded. "We gave notice on our apartment. We have nowhere to go." The confrontation that followed was every bit as painful as I'd anticipated, but also strangely liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I stood my ground against my family's expectations and manipulation. "Rebecca," my mother pleaded, tears forming in her eyes. "Surely you can break the leases. There must be some way to fix this misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding, Mom," I replied firmly. "I made a deliberate business decision about my property. These tenants have legal rights, and I intend to honor my commitments to them." My father's disappointment was written across his face. "I don't understand how you could be so selfish, Rebecca. Your brother has children to consider." The accusation of selfishness stung, but I'd prepared for it. 6 years of saving, Dad. 6 years of living in a studio apartment and driving an old car so I could afford this investment. How is protecting that investment selfish? Marcus paced angrily beside his loaded minivan. "So what are we supposed to do now? We gave notice. We're supposed to be out of our place tonight." "The same thing you would have done if I'd never bought this duplex," I replied. "Find housing you can afford within your budget." Amanda joined the attack, her voice sharp with accusation. "Easy for you to say from your position of privilege. Some of us have real responsibilities." Her comment ignited a fresh wave of anger. "Privilege? I worked 60-hour weeks for years to save for this property. I brought lunch to work every day instead of eating out. I haven't taken a real vacation in 5 years. That's not privilege. That's sacrifice and planning." David discreetly moved Dr. Park away from our family drama, beginning her move-in process, while we continued our heated discussion. I was grateful for his professionalism in an increasingly uncomfortable situation. My mother made one final attempt at emotional manipulation. "This isn't the daughter we raised, Rebecca. Family comes first in our home." "Yes, family comes first," I agreed. "But I'm family too. And for 34 years my needs have come last, not anymore." The argument continued for another 20 minutes, with accusations flying from all sides. Marcus called me heartless. Amanda accused me of betraying family values. My parents expressed disappointment that cut deep despite my resolve. But throughout the confrontation, I maintained my position. The leases were signed, the tenants had rights. My decision was final. Finally, Marcus threw his hands up in disgust. "Fine. We'll figure something out, but don't expect us to forgive you for this anytime soon." As they loaded back into their vehicles and drove away, I felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness. The confrontation was over, but the family relationships I'd known my entire life were forever changed. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my Belltown apartment, watching the Seattle sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, reflecting on how dramatically my life has changed. The duplex investment exceeded all expectations. Both tenants renewed their leases, and the property value increased 12% in the first year. My family relationship slowly began to heal, but on new terms. My parents eventually acknowledged that they'd overstepped boundaries and should have consulted me about my own property. The respect they now show for my decisions feels foreign but welcome. Marcus's journey proved more challenging, but ultimately beneficial. Forced to find housing within his means, he and Amanda located a modest apartment across town. More importantly, Marcus finally secured steady employment and, for the first time in his adult life, created an emergency fund. Amanda expanded her yoga instruction and added nutrition coaching to her services. The twins adapted to their smaller living space better than anyone expected. Camden and Tyler still visit me regularly, and our relationship is stronger now that I'm Aunt Rebecca by choice rather than obligation. My own life flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. The confidence gained from standing up to my family translated into other areas. I negotiated a significant raise at work, started a small investment club with colleagues, and even began dating someone who respects my independence and financial goals. The most surprising outcome was how breaking the cycle of enabling actually helped Marcus grow. Without constant bailouts, he developed skills he'd never needed before: budgeting, planning, problem-solving. Our relationship, though strained initially, eventually became more balanced and authentic. Looking back, I realized that the Duplex wasn't just a real estate investment. It was the catalyst that forced my family to confront unhealthy patterns that had existed for decades. Setting boundaries felt selfish at first, but it ultimately created space for everyone to grow. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive patterns, even when it's difficult and painful. If you've ever felt like the family safety net, expected to sacrifice your goals for others' poor choices, remember that saying no isn't cruel, it's necessary for everyone's growth. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself when it matters most.